that white acceptance? Is that and you know, I was listening to you today. I kind of want to combine that. As Black people born in America, I was listening to you speak, and I want to ask you: is if we walk the straight line, is our life predetermined?
Ooh, yeah. In this sense, in one sense, yes. In another sense, no. But I'll tell you this: people who think that they can transcend their blackness, that their life cannot be influenced by, affected by their blackness, in that sense, are living in a fantasy world, an utter fantasy world. Here I am. Take me for example. I'll just give you the latest multiple incidents I can recount just over the last 4 or 5 years,
Mm.
in which I have, I teach in law school. I'm a chair professor. I have, a respectable a car, a respectable house. I'm Mr. Respectability,
Yeah,
right? In terms of all the criteria you want to come up with
bells and whistles, right? Yeah.
respectability politics,
Mhm.
I'm Mr. Respectable, right? But when I'm driving to school to teach my torts class about a year and a half ago, and I'm rolling down Exposition,
Yeah.
I'm pulled over I see some red and blue party lights in my rear view window. And so I pull over, it's a 35-mile-an-hour zone. I might have been going 43, 4 miles an hour. I didn't want to quibble. I figured you take your ticket and go on about your business.
Mm.
Even if I did think I was going with the rest of the traffic, so what? I don't want to quibble about that. Just take your ticket. But I'm sitting there waiting. 5 minutes go by, still no officer. 10 minutes go by, I don't see any officer come up to the window. Next thing I know, I hear helicopter blades overhead. Then here comes some more cruisers. Here comes some foot patrols. And 15, 17, 18 minutes into the stop, here comes the officer to the window finally, looks in, and sees me sitting in the car with, when I go to work to teach, I have, a shirt, button-up shirt and a tie, and,
Sure.
a jacket in the back seat, and, slacks and work shoes. And he was shocked. You could see he was taken aback because from the back of the car, all he saw was a fro. All he saw was, kind of a fro. And he said, now wait, you shouldn't have somebody with a fro sitting in a German sedan, a S63 AMG, should
Mhm.
not be sitting in that kind of car unless he stole it.
He
Right?
said
And
that?
no, that
Oh,
he
he had to be
concluded
saying that.
that
Yes,
because he said, I assumed you were a flight risk.
yeah.
Right? Well, why did you assume? What about me? What did he see that
Mhm.
made him draw that conclusion?
Right.
That I must be in a stolen car, that I must not belong in this car. That's why I present a flight risk. Right? And so, I mean, I can go down, example after example of cases that prove that you might make big cash, like Stevie Wonder used to say. You might make big cash, but you cannot cash in your face as
Mm.
a Black person in America. And for many Black people in America, one of the Black taxes that Black people pay in America is white people's assumptions about our criminality.
Mm.
And, I'll give you one more real quick example. And no matter how much money or fame you get, even Oprah Winfrey got discriminated against on that basis. You don't escape the Black tax. I'm down at JW Marriott a little before that, waiting for Uber. I won't. There's a backstory I won't go into right now. 3 guards approached me. This JW Marriott, downtown LA,
Yeah.
right? Fancy little hotel.
Connected to the Ritz-Carlton.
Yep, I'm sitting down, and they say the 2 white ones stand back, and they send the Black one over. There were 3. The 2 white ones stay back about 15 feet. The Black one walks up to me and says, "Sir, are you here to see someone?" I say, "Well, yes, I am. But why aren't you asking anyone else in the lobby?" There were like 80 people in the lobby. Why are you asking me? And he said, "Well, sir, we've been having a problem with transients, i.e. homeless people,
Yes.
right? Now I was dressed like I am now, with a button-up shirt, a jacket, slacks, hard shoes. You know, I did not have a tie. That's the only thing I did not have. Otherwise, right? His clear implication was, of course, that I looked like a houseless person, but I wanted to hear him actually say it, even though the implication was abundantly clear. So I said, "So you're saying I look like a transient?" And he said, "Sir, don't take it personally." Then he turned around and walked away. At that point, the good thing about working in a place like USC Law School for over 20 years, a lot of your students are out practicing law now. They're partners at firms, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So I called one at Latham Watkins and said, if he comes back, I know he won't, but if he does, I want you to be on the phone. And I started tweeting about it. You know, back then, I said, I know he's not going to come back, but, you know, I'm going to tweet about this anyway. He came back. Oh, this time, the other two were much closer. They came right up on me, and he said, "Sir, what is the name of the guest you came here to see?" Now, as a criminal law professor and a tort prof, I can characterize that transaction for you legally. What he was saying was, if I don't give them a name that they can find in their guest database at that moment, I've assumed the ejectable status of a trespasser, and they were about to lay hands on me and toss me out of that lobby. Right? That was the nature of that transaction. So I was presented with the choice that Black people in America are presented with hundreds of thousands of times a day. And here's the choice. I had only two choices in that situation. Two and only two. One, tell him the name of Lino Garcia, my homie from A Better Chance, a program I was in that got me, you know, into college. That I either give him Lino's name, swallow that indignity, confirm his stereotypes about me, vindicate his misperceptions of me, you know, absorb that. It's more than a microaggression, it's spirit murder. You know, when you keep on swallowing those indignities, that's spirit murder. Okay, so that's choice number one. You either give him Lino's name and incur that, number one. Or number two, and here's the only other choice, tell him to go fuck himself, right? That's and with choice number two, you're also going to wind up in the back of a cruiser, right? So it's pick your poison and swallow that indignity, right? And they're going to make it like they did with Sandra Bland, as ignominious and as possible, and as humiliating as possible, right? So that is the dilemma, you know, that we face over and over, and I call it the black tax, and it is why there's rage in the street, and it's why one of the reasons we saw what we saw in the summer, 6 weeks straight, night in, night out, day in, day out.
How do we fix us first? Because they've created what Malcolm X say, the house Negro and the field Negro. How do we fix us? How does that 90% become a unit with that 10% that you spoke of earlier?
Yeah. Well, we first recognize, we see through the facade, the false appearances, right? We see, for example, that when Chris Rock and other politics of respectability champions, I'll throw Barack Obama in with this crew and a number of others, but when Chris Rock says, you know, I love Black people, but I hate niggas, and Black people are law-abiding people, and so-called N-words are law breakers, right? And that's just a moral distinction. It sounds like a moral distinction, right? Hey, I'm just calling it like I see it. You good, bad, and the evil, you know, and the ugly. I'm just good and bad, you know, worthy and wicked. Well, the fact of the matter is that the middle-class Black crime rates and middle-class white crime rates are almost exactly the same. There's hardly any difference between them. So most Black folks who are turning to street crime are coming from the ranks of truly disadvantaged Blacks. They're coming from backgrounds of grinding poverty, typically, right? So really, what Chris Rock was saying is, I love disproportionately the Black bourgeoisie, and I hate disproportionately truly disadvantaged Blacks. Because what you have is really a class distinction masquerading as a moral distinction. There's real class bigotry in trying to draw the line between worthy and wicked blacks on the basis of involvement in criminal activity. You know, it just do the math. It's just a simple math problem. This doesn't require fancy philosophical analyses, right? Either people are, you know, if poverty is associated with crime, then either people are poor because they're bad, which doesn't make sense because people are often born into poverty, or they're bad because they're poor. That makes a lot more sense. You know, when you take a group of people, you disproportionately concentrate them in desperate circumstances, and it should sadden but not surprise you to find them disproportionately turning to desperate undertakings like crime. All right? So, but that still means that you are dumping on poor blacks disproportionately with your moral framework that looks so objective. That's what we mean by systemic racism. That's systemic racism and classism combined, right? It looks like, oh, I'm just making neutral moral judgments about people who do crimes and people who don't do crime. It just so happens that people who do these street crimes are mostly poor blacks. But that's just a coincidence. That doesn't in any way derail my point, my moral judgment in any way. Well, why doesn't it? You know, so essentially, one of the things I'm arguing is we need to radically overhaul our moral framework. We need a revolution in consciousness. And it may sound like I am tilting at windmills, like I'm saying, oh, you know, we need to replace, you know, retribution, retaliation, and revenge when it comes to black criminals. We need to replace that response with one rooted in restoration, rehabilitation, personal redemption. That radical shift. Now, when I say that, you know, people can think and say, oh, well, you know, that sounds like pie in the sky. Come on, who thinks like that? Who talks like that? You know, a lot of times, you know, kind of revolutionary ideas can, I guess, sound like that, can strike deer that way. But you know what? And I'm going to talk to right now to black folk for a moment.
Please,
you know,
take your time.
I talk to a lot of folk all the time, and a lot of what I have to say has a universal audience, and I'm fine with that. But you know, I hardly go to a black function,
Well, welcome.
a big black function, in which there aren't prayers, in which there aren't bowings of heads,
Mm-hmm.
right, and the saying of grace.
Gotcha.
All right. And you know, different kinds, depending on the nature of the service, different kinds of benedictions, etc. But there is a lot of real respect and deference shown to Christianity in black gatherings, you know, probably more than any other group, you know, in kind of general group that I've been around a lot, you know, you just see that a lot. And I think, you know, I don't have a problem with that myself. I can see why some people might, but I was just kind of raised in a Catholic Baptist kind of home and background. You know, I see Martin Luther King and Malcolm X coming from religious backgrounds and being, you know, fierce and social justice and all that. But I can understand people having concerns, but I want to still continue talking to those people who are in the faith and of the faith, right? And say, why is it that we as church-going folk on Sunday mornings embrace a moral framework that stresses redemption, restoration, and rehabilitation, right? And, you know, in fact, and then Monday through Saturday, we go right back to retribution, retaliation, and revenge. Right? You can't turn on the TV. You can't see a movie without retribution, retaliation, and revenge. You know, every narrative, every storyline, somebody's getting his or her comeuppance, you know, getting what they had coming to them. Die slow. You know, you're invited to say a lot of times as a villain, you know, is perishing, you know, a slow, torturous death or whatever. So we go back to retribution, retaliation, revenge, Monday through Saturday. And then Sunday morning, we're sitting up there again, talking about, yeah, you know, let me put it this way. I did a play, Race, Rap, and Redemption, about Tukey Williams,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? When he was put to death, and the core question of my play, Race, Rap, and Redemption, was, should we pour liquor for Tukey? Should we express ritualistic solidarity in the form of a libation ceremony with a first-degree murderer, which Tukey Williams was, who co-founded the Crips, which he did, right? And so my play was an effort to encourage us to sympathetically identify with and ultimately even stand in solidarity with the Stanley Tukeys of the world, and to resist efforts to execute them. That was the thrust of the play. But anyway, I was talking about the play to one of my colleagues, another law professor, a black person back east, and she said, "Hey, I got to tell you," a fellow Christian,
Yeah.
and she said, "I got to tell you, I think he does deserve the death penalty. He did some horrible things and co-founded the Crips. I think, how much pain and suffering they've caused." She said, "I think he does deserve the death penalty." I said, "Okay. So, okay, what do you think then?" "Okay, I'm with you. What do you think would be the appropriate penal fate then
George
of
Washington.
someone who didn't kill just, say, 5 people like Tukey did with his own
George
hands,
Washington, somebody
but
like that.
killed thousands of people, men, women, and children, completely innocent, for no other reason than their belief system? What would you think of him?" She, "Oh, easy, off with his head." I said, "The person I just described is Paul, who was, before he was Paul, what was his name?
Saul.
Saul. What was Saul on the road to Damascus to do? Kill some more innocent Christians. So if what you think is appropriate for intentional, unjustified killers like Paul and Saul was the death penalty, if that had happened to Saul, we wouldn't even have a New Testament, because Saul, when he became Paul, went around and collected up Matthew and John and everybody else, right, to write the New Testament. So, we understand redemption, restoration, rehabilitation on Sunday morning, right? But then come Monday, we're back to retribution, retaliation, and revenge. And I'm trying in this book to have us completely throw out that retribution, retaliation, and revenge approach, because if we don't, we can never make deep cuts in racialized mass incarceration in the new Jim Crow. Because most of the people behind bars in state prisons, contrary to what Michelle Alexander says in the new Jim Crow, she's factually wrong when she says that we went from 300,000 to 2.2 million prisoners from 1980 to the mid-aughts by locking up a lot of low-level nonviolent drug offenders. That is factually wrong. As John Pfaff points out in his book, Locked In, when you look at the prison system, which is where 87% of the prisoners reside, the vast majority of them are there for violent or serious offenses, not low-level nonviolent offenses. So if we're going to make deep cuts in mass incarceration, we're going to have to change our moral framework and come up with a way to think about violent offenders that is 180 degrees different from retribution, retaliation, and revenge.